Mouseketeers. We want to say hello and give 3 cheers for all of you who see us every day.
They were America's golden children, tap dancing, ear-wearing, smile-flashing kids who became the heartbeat of a generation.
Cheers for the merry Mouseketeers! Mouseketeers!
But behind those Mickey Mouse ears, the cameras hid something darker: heartbreak, scandal, disinheritance, disease, and in one chilling case,
Annette Funicello quickly became America's sweetheart. Well, today she passed away at the age of 7.
murder. Some of these children grew old together. Others never made it that far at all.
Quack, 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 quack. Hi, Mouseketeers!
This is the bittersweet truth behind the tragic details of the original Mickey Mouse Club cast. Where are the surviving Mouseketeers today?
That's right! It's time for the Mouseketeers!
Nearly 70 years after the Mickey Mouse Club first aired in 1955, only a handful of the original 39 Mouseketeers are still with us.
And now Firehouse 5 plus 2 plus the Mouseketeers present I Want to Be a Fireman.
The surviving cast members have publicly gathered together only twice. The first reunion came in 1980, when 31 of the original 39 returned for a televised special hosted by songwriter Paul Williams. Audiences watched as old film montages played beside their grown-up selves, a haunting overlap of who they had been and who they had become.
In 1955, a record only cost 69 cents.
Yeah, but Bobby, you didn't have a stereo to play it on.
Annette Funicello performed gracefully that night, though early symptoms of the illness that would eventually take her life were already beginning to show. The second and final reunion came 35 years later at Disney's D23 Expo in 2015.
Part of history, jam-packed with
jitterbug and jerk things.
It's a blending of the two generations.
It's like deja vu, all like spiked out.
It's a unique experience.
Just 7 of the original Mouseketeers were still alive enough to attend. Sherry Alberoni, Sharon Baird, Bobby Burgess, Tommy Cole, Darlene Gillespie, Cubby O'Brien, and Doreen Tracy. They laughed, they sang, they cried. And then, one by one, they began to disappear. By late 2026, only 4 remain. Sherry Alberoni, the bright-eyed performer who became a beloved voice actress. Sharon Baird, the petite dancer who later worked inside the costumes of beloved children's characters. Bobby Burgess, who twirled his way to fame on The Lawrence Welk Show. And Cubby O'Brien, the prodigy drummer who played alongside Karen Carpenter and Liza Minnelli. 4 left out of 39. Annette Funicello lost everything to MS. If the Mickey Mouse Club had a queen, it was Annette Funicello. Discovered by Walt Disney himself at age 12 while performing as the Swan Queen in a ballet recital.
My father wanted to name me Conjetta. Imagine Conjetta Funicello.
Yeah.
It would have gone on this side of the sweater and then around to the back again.
To the back.
Annette became the most beloved Mouseketeer of them all, receiving up to 6,000 fan letters a month at the height of her fame. She was the girl every American boy wrote love letters to, and every American girl wanted to be.
To cement further the happy relationship between your country and ours, we hereby make you an honorary Mouseketeer.
After the show ended, Annette transitioned into beach films alongside Frankie Avalon, becoming the wholesome face of an entire era of cinema.
Man, this is one crazy beach.
You can say that again.
She married, had 3 children, and seemed to live the fairy tale that fame had promised her. But behind the smile, something was beginning to go wrong. In the late 1980s, Annette began experiencing strange symptoms: dizziness, balance problems, blurred vision. For years, she hid them, terrified that fans would think she was drunk on stage. In 1992, she finally went public with the truth. She had multiple sclerosis. What followed was a decades-long descent that broke the hearts of those who had grown up with her. The disease robbed her of her ability to walk, then her ability to speak, then her ability to even recognize her own family. Her husband, Glenn Holt, cared for her devotedly, refusing to place her in a facility. He once described feeding her by hand and telling her stories she could no longer respond to, hoping somewhere inside the girl with the Mickey ears could still hear him. Annette Funicello passed away on April 8, 2013 from complications of MS. She was 70 years old. The girl who had once been the brightest star in Disney's sky spent her final years trapped in silence, but the world never forgot her. When Walt Disney died in 1966, his last note to her reportedly read, "Annette, never lose that wonderful smile." She never did, not even when the disease took everything else. Paul Petersen was fired for throwing a punch. He was 9 years old, small, confident, and by his own admission, a little too honest for Hollywood. Paul Petersen joined the Mickey Mouse Club in 1955, ready to sing, dance, and smile for America. But just 3 weeks in, his Disney dream came crashing down over a single impulsive moment. During rehearsals, a casting staffer named Lee Travers wouldn't stop teasing him, calling him Mouse, a nickname Paul hated. Finally, the boy snapped. "I said, 'Don't call me that, fatso,' and I punched him in the stomach," Paul later recalled. Unfortunately, Walt Disney himself witnessed the whole thing. Paul was called into Disney's office that same day and fired on the spot. It could have ended there. Another forgotten child star, another quiet failure. Instead, Paul came back stronger than ever. By his teenage years, he was America's sweetheart, starring as Jeff Stone on The Donna Reed Show and recording hit songs like Lollipops and Roses. But when the fame faded, the demons came. Drinking, depression.
Whenever I ask an impolite question, I say it is impolite, and that kind of takes the sting out of it. What did it cost?
Pretty close to $10,000 because of all the racing equipment.
$10,000?
The familiar collapse that has swallowed so many child stars whole. Paul refused to drown. Instead, he founded A Minor Consideration, a nonprofit dedicated to protecting child performers from exploitation, abuse, and the predatory machinery of Hollywood itself. He has spent decades fighting for children he doesn't even know, trying to make sure that no kid ever gets fired, used up, or thrown away the way so many of his peers were. He turned one bad punch into a lifelong mission. The boy Walt Disney fired became the man Hollywood couldn't afford to ignore. Darlene Gillespie's checkered path. Darlene Gillespie was once the golden girl of the Mickey Mouse Club.
Ernest Borgnine won the Academy Award.
Okay, I surrender. But I still say I had a good time in 1955.
A Canadian-born talent with a clear, crystalline voice and an effortless charm that made her one of Disney's brightest discoveries. She performed for 3 full seasons, earned U.S. citizenship in 1956, and was widely expected to become the breakout star of the show. Then, Annette happened. As Annette Funicello rose to dominate the spotlight, Darlene found herself shoved into the shadows. She kept working, appearing in National Velvet, Dr. Kildare, releasing albums under Disney's Buena Vista label, and later recording country music under the name Darlene Valentine. But the resentment, by all accounts, never quite faded. Then her story took a much darker turn. 2 failed marriages came first. Then a string of escalating legal troubles that would ultimately destroy what was left of her Disney legacy. In 1998, Darlene was convicted on 12 federal counts, including conspiracy, securities fraud, and perjury, charges related to a stock manipulation scheme. She was sentenced to 2 years in federal prison. "I believe with all my heart that at the end of the day I will be vindicated," she told reporters as she was led away. Vindication never came. After serving her sentence, Darlene quietly rebuilt her life as a nurse in California, trading the spotlight for hospital fluorescence, the applause for the beeping of monitors. The girl who once sang for millions now spent her days caring for strangers who had no idea who she had been. Once a symbol of Disney innocence, Darlene Gillespie's story became a cautionary tale of how fame can lift a child impossibly high, and how reality, sooner or later, always brings them back down. The rifleman's son showed all in The Naked Ape. Johnny Crawford's life was a study in contradictions, from Disney innocence to adult controversy to a final quiet battle that almost no one saw coming. At just 9 years old, Johnny became one of the youngest Mouseketeers ever cast. But his natural talent quickly carried him beyond Disney's gates. Within a year, he had landed the role that would define his life, Mark McCain, the loyal son on The Rifleman, opposite Chuck Connors. Their father-son chemistry became television gold, the kind of warmth that still moves audiences in reruns more than 60 years later. But Johnny's wholesome image took a shocking turn in 1973. That year, he starred in The Naked Ape, a film produced by Hugh Hefner and co-starring Victoria Principal. Johnny appeared fully nude in the film and later became one of the first male celebrities to appear completely nude in Playboy magazine. Some saw it as rebellion, others as a desperate reinvention. Either way, the boy from The Rifleman was gone. In his later years, Johnny channeled his deep love of nostalgia into the Johnny Crawford Orchestra, performing 1920s and 1930s swing music in dance halls across America. He was happy, he was creative, he was finally peaceful. and then his memory began to slip. Johnny was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease, and as his condition worsened, his old friend Paul Petersen, yes, the same Paul who had once been fired for punching a producer, launched a fundraiser to help cover his care. Johnny Crawford passed away in April 2021 at age 75. The boy who once stood beside the rifleman spent his final months unable to remember the films, the orchestra, or even the people who loved him most. Dallas Johann suffered from stage fright. He was supposed to be one of the very first faces America fell in love with on television. In 1955, 13-year-old Dallas Johann was chosen as the very first Mouseketeer ever hired for the Mickey Mouse Club. But behind the bright smile and Mickey ear cap, Dallas was hiding something that would destroy his dream before it began. A crippling, paralyzing fear of performing. Crew members later remembered that whenever the cameras turned toward him, Dallas would burst into tears. At the time, stage fright wasn't seen as something to be treated or understood. It was simply a sign that you didn't belong in show business. Within weeks, Dallas was quietly released from the show, and in a twist that must have stung deeply, his own younger brother, John Lee Johann, was hired to take his place. For Dallas, the wound never quite closed. He spent decades watching from the sidelines as the show that should have been his made stars of others. Yet he never stopped dancing. By the 1960s, he had conquered his fear enough to appear as an uncredited dancer in Elvis Presley's Viva Las Vegas and Kissing Cousins, and later performed in Broadway productions of The Rothschilds and The Pajama Game. His brother, John Lee Johann, had only a brief Disney career before fading from the public eye entirely, living quietly far from the spotlight that had once chosen him over his older brother. Today, Dallas lives in North Carolina, still studying theater. Proof that sometimes, even when stage fright wins the battle, it doesn't have to win the war. Doreen Tracy also appeared in The Buff. Doreen Tracy was one of the brightest smiles on the Mickey Mouse Club, a London-born performer whose mischievous charm and boundless energy made her an instant favorite. She wasn't just part of the show, she was family. Fellow castmate Tommy Cole once said they called her our Dodo because she was always cheerful, always ready to entertain. After the show ended, Doreen stayed close to the spotlight. She appeared in Westward Ho, The Wagons, traveled to Vietnam to perform for American troops, and built a reputation as one of the most loyal and warm-hearted alumni of the entire Disney family. Then, in 1976, she made the choice that nearly erased her from Disney history. Still working under the company's umbrella at the time, Doreen posed nude for Gallery magazine, wearing absolutely nothing but her Mickey Mouse ears. The magazine ran the headline, "Mouseketeer in the Nude, Little Doreen Grows Up." Disney was furious. Ties were cut. Phone calls stopped being returned. The girl who had once been embraced as family was suddenly treated like a stranger. In her 2001 memoir, Confessions of a Mouseketeer, Doreen admitted she had been swept up by ego and hadn't fully understood the lasting damage the photo shoot would do. "I thought I was being daring," she wrote. "Instead, I became the cautionary tale." But Disney eventually forgave her. She was invited to the 2015 Mouseketeer reunion, her final television appearance. Doreen Tracy passed away in January 2018 after a 2-year battle with pancreatic cancer. She was 74 years old. The black sheep of Disney never stopped shining, even when the studio refused to look at her. The Rooney brothers were fired for mischief. They were Hollywood royalty before they could even drive. Mickey Rooney Jr. and Tim Rooney, sons of the legendary Mickey Rooney, the man who once claimed that Mickey Mouse himself had been named after him. When the brothers joined the Mickey Mouse Club in 1955, expectations were sky high. Both boys could sing. Both could dance. Both carried one of the most famous surnames in show business. Disney hoped that family name would help launch the new program into the stratosphere. But behind those Mouseketeer smiles, mischief was brewing. According to long-told studio accounts, the Rooney brothers wandered one afternoon into Disney's legendary ink and paint department, the heart of the studio's animation magic, and decided to have a little fun. They began pouring paints into the wrong cans, swapping colors, contaminating jars that animators relied on for their painstaking work. When word reached the higher-ups, the reaction was swift and final. Both brothers were fired. Tim reportedly never even appeared on the show. Mickey Jr.'s run lasted less than a year. Both boys spent the rest of their lives trying to escape their father's enormous shadow, with limited success. They struggled with addiction, instability, and the weight of carrying a name they hadn't asked for. When Mickey Rooney Sr. died in 2014, the wound became permanent. He left his 8 children almost nothing in his will, including Mickey Jr. and Tim. Mickey Rooney Jr. passed away in 2022. Tim Rooney died years earlier in 2006 of complications from dermatomyositis. Their mischief had long faded. The heartbreak never quite did. Billie Jean Beanblossom was robbed at Disneyland. Billie Jean Beanblossom was one of the lesser-known Mouseketeers, a background dancer whose grace and rhythm shone quietly in the corners of the show. She appeared for only a single season, but her work caught the eye of choreographers who would remember her for years to come. After leaving the show, Billie Jean stepped away from fame, resurfacing only briefly with a dance role on The Muppet Show in 1974. But in 1995, her name returned to headlines, not for a comeback, but for a nightmare. While visiting Disneyland with her children and grandchildren, Billie Jean, now using her married name, Billie Jean Matzdorf, was robbed at gunpoint in the park's parking lot. The gunman fled with more than $1,600 in cash and the family's identification documents. He was never caught. But the true shock came afterward. According to Billie Jean, Disneyland security refused to help. Worse, they detained her family for questioning and at one point allowed her terrified grandchildren to watch costume Disney characters remove their heads, shattering, in her words, the magic that should have lasted them a lifetime. She sued Disney. The case was dismissed. The judge deemed the experience unimportant. Still, Billie Jean chose forgiveness. 2 decades later, she returned for the 2015 Mouseketeer reunion, smiling once again under those familiar lights. A quiet symbol of resilience from a woman who had once been robbed in the happiest place on earth and who refused to let it take her joy. Dennis Day was a victim of murder. Of all the tragic stories to come out of the Mickey Mouse Club, none is darker than what happened to Dennis Day. Once a cheerful Mouseketeer who sang and danced alongside the others for 2 years in the 1950s, Dennis later drifted away from Hollywood entirely. He sought a quieter, gentler life, and in the 1970s, he found it. He met his longtime partner, Ernest Caswell, and the two moved to a small property in Phoenix, Oregon. They became fixtures at Renaissance fairs. They ran a tiny business making and selling wine jellies. Friends remembered them as gentle, creative, deeply in love. For nearly 5 decades, that peace held. Then, in 2018, it shattered. Ernest, by then suffering from advanced dementia, reported Dennis missing. Police searched the property but found nothing. Even when neighbors began complaining of a strange odor coming from the home, investigators left without making an arrest. They questioned the couple's handyman, a man named Daniel Berta, who showed up to the interview covered in fresh scratches and bruises, and then released him. It would take 9 more months before investigators returned and finally made the grim discovery. Dennis's remains were found hidden inside the home, buried beneath a pile of clothes. He had been there the entire time. Daniel Berta was eventually arrested and confessed. 2 women were also charged with stealing Dennis's car and jewelry after the killing. Berta was later convicted and sentenced to 20 years in prison. The story stunned fans who still remembered Dennis as the boy with the bright smile from the black and white screen. The boy who had once sung for America died alone in the home he had built with the man he loved, silenced by senseless violence, forgotten by the very system meant to protect him. Karen Pendleton was paralyzed by an accident. Karen Pendleton was one of the youngest Mouseketeers, a 9-year-old with a tap routine, an infectious giggle, and a smile so bright it reportedly won over Walt Disney himself in a single audition. She had no real acting experience. She didn't need any. Karen quickly became one of the show's most beloved fixtures, introducing cartoons, performing in musical numbers, and appearing in projects like Westward Ho!, The Wagons, and The Magical World of Disney. When her contract ended in 1959, Disney begged her to stay. Her father said no. He wanted her to have a normal childhood. She didn't get one. Back at school, the teasing was merciless. They'd say, "Wiggle your ears and we'll give you some cheese," Karen later recalled with a laugh that didn't quite hide the wound. But life had a far crueler test waiting. In 1983, a devastating car accident left Karen paralyzed from the waist down. She would never walk again. What she did next defined her. Instead of disappearing into bitterness, Karen rebuilt her life from the ground up. She earned a bachelor's degree, then a master's. She became a passionate advocate for people with disabilities and for women escaping domestic abuse. She traveled, she spoke. She lived louder in many ways than she ever had as a child star. Karen Pendleton passed away in 2019 at age 73 from a heart attack. She is forever remembered not as the little girl who fell, but as the woman who refused to stop smiling, even when the world had given her every reason to. The 4 Mouseketeers still with us today. And then there are the 4 still standing. The last living thread connecting us to that black and white morning television magic. Sherry Alberoni was 9 years old when she joined the show in its final season. After Disney, she became one of the most prolific voice actresses in Hollywood history, voicing characters in The Flintstones, Josie and the Pussycats, and Super Friends. Today, she lives quietly in California, still active in fan reunions, and reportedly still in possession of her original Mickey years. Sharon Baird was tiny, just 4'11" as an adult, and that became her superpower. After the show, she made a remarkable career performing inside the costumes of beloved children's characters, including roles on HR Pufnstuf, The Bugaloos, and even as one of the original performers inside Mickey Mouse himself at Disneyland. The girl who once danced beside the mouse eventually became him. Bobby Burgess found his greatest fame after Disney. He spent more than 2 decades dancing on The Lawrence Welk Show, becoming one of the most recognizable ballroom performers on American television. He still teaches dance today, well into his 80s. Cubby O'Brien, the freckle-faced drummer prodigy, went on to become one of the most respected session drummers in the music industry, touring and recording with Karen Carpenter, Liza Minnelli, Bernadette Peters, and Anne Margaret. We should also remember Tommy Cole, who survived long enough to attend the 2015 reunion, a beloved makeup artist after his Disney days, 3-time Emmy winner who passed away in 2020. 4 children, 1 show, 70 years. The magic still plays on.